Hello, welcome to part 2 of the narrated slideshow, The Sound of Poetry, Rhyme and Beyond. And again, it's a review of terms and concepts in Chapter 5, and it would be handy to have your textbook available to review some of the examples. So we're going to start off by talking about syntax as a way of working with sound in poetry. And I know that earlier in the course I talked about unnatural syntax and how it can sound awkward and forced when you're trying to sort of bend the language to fit a rhyme. But there are also ways in which you can rearrange the syntax in unexpected ways to impact the sound and the way a listener hears the poem. And when you do that, it can have a pleasing effect. So here's an example from E.E. Cummings, who is probably best known for rearranging syntax or the natural word order of a sentence. And when you first hear the title, it gets your attention in sometimes a startling way. Spring is like a perhaps hand. What the heck is a perhaps hand? It just sounds strange. So let's take a look. But as you think about it, and you think about that title after he's gotten your attention with that weird word order, you say, well, spring is kind of like a perhaps hand. It's tentative. We think it's here. One day it's beautiful, and especially in the Northeast, the next day we've got a cold spell or a blizzard. So it's it kind of wants to come, but then it pulls back. So spring is like a perhaps hand, which comes carefully out of nowhere, arranging a window into which people look while people stare, arranging and changing, placing carefully there a strange thing and a known thing here, and changing everything carefully. Spring is like a perhaps hand in a window, carefully to and fro, moving new and old things while people stare carefully, moving a perhaps fraction of flower here, placing an inch there, and without breaking anything. So again, that idea of perhaps hand gets our attention. He also works with sound in other ways. He's got the internal rhyme with the arranging and changing and strange, and lots of repetition of sound, old, to and fro, and the stare and the carefully, another example of an internal rhyme or a slant rhyme, and but mostly I wanted to show you this idea of the syntax. He's also got a perhaps fraction of flower, which is not what we expect, and so it gets our attention. So that's syntax. Now coming back to the slideshow, we will talk about alliteration, which is the repetition of consonant sounds. And once I show you the example, you will remember what alliteration is. Susie sells seashells by the seashore, which I challenge you to repeat 5 times. Poets have been using alliteration for centuries. It's frequently used by poets today, whether they're working in traditional forms or in free verse. And here's an example that's in our book by Pierce Shelley from the 19th century. Let's hope this link works. And yay. Let's see. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survives, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." So he uses alliteration repeatedly in this poem, and let's take a look at the S sound. Who said, "Stone stand, near them on the sand, half sunk." So again, repetition of the S sound. And then sometimes he uses alliteration in close approximation. So there is the lone and level sands that stretch far away. So you got the lone and level, you have the sands stretch, and he's also got the boundless and bare. So a lot of alliteration in this poem. Coming back to the slideshow, we'll talk about dissonance. And this is when a poet uses sound in a harsh way to grab the reader's attention, for example, by interrupting an alliterating line with another sound. Now, that's just one example. They could use dissonance in any number of ways. But here's my own example. At the eyesore seashore, Susie sells seashells and slees on the sand. So that eyesore seashore has broken or interrupted the alliteration and gotten our attention and drawn us to this idea of the eyesore seashore, which conveys something completely different than the innocent line of Susie sells seashells by the seashore, but might be sort of a rundown Coney Island type of place that's seen better days, and maybe instead of kind of like what Atlantic City used to be known for, sort of a sleazy place, and now Atlantic City has come back, and it's a destination and so forth. But years ago, it was kind of a seedy place. So there's also the tool of assonance, which is the repetition of vowel sounds, and there's a nice poem in our book on 97, which it's not available online. It's just a short little poem called Mama by Candace Schaefer. Mama moans, fold on folds of flesh upon bone, rest inert in her chair, powder blue eyes, imprisoned in a mind scattered by time, are looking through me to despair. So in this poem, Candace repeats certain vowel sounds. There's the moans and the folds and the bone and the flesh and the rest and the eyes and the mind and the time. And I think anyone who has a relative that maybe is suffering from dementia can relate to the poem, and just this repetition of the sounds sort of comes, builds over time as you read the poem. So there's also mimesis, which is when words suggest their meaning by the sounds that they make. Chunk, sleazy, chordal. These words, they just sound the way they mean, or they mean the way they sound. When we say sleazy, even if you don't know what sleazy means, maybe you're a non-English speaker, the first time you hear it, it's like, ooh, sleazy. And then there's onomatopoeia, which is words that imitate their meaning by the sounds that they make. Buzz, zip, swish. And Lewis Carroll's poem Jabberwocky has many great examples of both mimesis and onomatopoeia, and there's a lot of words in that poem that he made up, like chordal or chortle, that have since become part of the English language. And when we think of chortle or chordal, however you pronounce it, we think of a certain kind of gleeful laugh that maybe is almost a little evil. So let's see if we can get to Jabberwocky. And we'll see. It was being nice to me a minute ago. Oops. Oh, here we go. Thank you. Okay. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogroves, and the mome rats outgrabe. Beware the jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the jub-jub bird, and shun the frumious bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand. Long time the mansom foe he sought. So rested he by the tum-tum tree, and stood a while in thought. And, as in uffish thought he stood, the jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. I'm pretty sure he made up burbled as well, which is now a common word. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through, the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. Snicker-snack, that would be the onomatopoeia. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. And that's a sort of a mimesis. We can picture what a galumphing is just based on its sound. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. Oh, frabjous day, callooh, callay! He chortled in his joy. And chortling, again, another example of the onomatopoeia. 'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogroves, and the mome wraths outgrabe. So there we have Jabberwock, and that's a poem that, like a lot of the E.E. Cummings, it sounds nonsensical, but it really, you kind of can picture this person galumphing, which is again the mimesis. We can picture the chortling, which I think I might have said onomatopoeia when I was reading it, but it's an example of mimesis. The snicker-snack would be the onomatopoeia, and we don't need to have these things explained. It's just we know what's going on in this battle in the forest. So this week the assignment asks you to write a rhyming poem, and remember that you can interpret rhyme in many ways. Feel free to experiment. You can play with sound in different ways, and if you are working with a more traditional rhyme, you might play with creating a break or disruption in a rhyming pattern. You can use alliteration or assonance, or both, to create an effective building towards a crescendo or climax, and have fun with it. And I look forward to seeing your poems. That's the end of the slideshow.